My name is Lily, and I want to share my experience of working on a school project with my stepbrother. And honestly, it was one of the most challenging and eye-opening experiences of my life. Because the very first day our teacher paired us together, I felt a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and curiosity, wondering how we would manage to work together effectively given that our personalities were so different. And I remember the moment we sat down to brainstorm ideas. He immediately suggested a visually striking model that would impress the class, while I was focused on ensuring accuracy, detail, and thorough research. And this created an immediate clash because neither of us was willing to compromise at first. And I could feel my frustration rising as I thought, how are we going to make this work if we can't even agree on the direction? And I noticed my stepbrother's tense expression mirrored my own as he insisted, I really think my idea is best because it will stand out. And I realized that if I wanted this project to succeed, I had to approach the situation differently, so I reminded myself to breathe, stay calm, and use polite negotiation phrases I had been practicing, such as, I see your point and I like your idea, but perhaps we can combine it with my approach so that we get both creativity and accuracy. And I began to actively listen to his explanation, asking clarifying questions like, can you explain why this visual approach will work? And how do you plan to present your part so it aligns with the research? And I noticed that asking these questions not only encouraged him to explain his reasoning, but also gave me the chance to practice conversational English naturally, using phrases like, I think this could work if we also consider, or would it make sense to try it this way first? And as we continued, I started practicing teamwork vocabulary by narrating our actions aloud, saying things like, I will focus on researching the background, information while you prepare the visual model, or we should set deadlines for each section so we stay on track, and this helped me internalize words like collaborate, coordinate, sequence, presentation, visual aid, and task, allocation, while also practicing sentence construction and context. And as we worked on dividing tasks, I noticed that small disagreements would arise over details, like which images to use, how to format the slides, or which statistics to include. And in these moments, I practiced conflict resolution phrases, saying things like, I understand your suggestion, but maybe we could adjust it slightly to include both perspectives, or let's test both approaches and decide which one is clearer. And he responded with phrases like, that's reasonable, let's combine them, which allowed me to practice polite negotiation and compromise. And I also practiced expressing my opinions clearly and respectfully by saying, I feel that including this data will make our argument stronger, or I think it would be more accurate if we cross-check these figures. And by narrating my thought process aloud, I reinforce both vocabulary and sentence structure, while improving my ability to articulate ideas in English. And as we started researching, I would ask questions like, can you summarize this section in your own words? Or how should we present these results visually? And then repeat his explanation aloud, saying, so we cross-referenced these statistics with the official report and included the most relevant ones, which helped me practice summarizing, sequencing, and conditional phrases like, if we include this chart, then we should explain its significance. And during the assembly of our project slides, I narrated each step aloud, saying, I am inserting the chart on slide 3, and then I'll add bullet points for clarity, while my stepbrother narrated his own steps, saying, I am preparing the model for demonstration and aligning the labels properly. And this constant narration helped me internalize verbs of action, descriptive phrases and sequence words, like first, next, and finally, and as minor mistakes happened, such as mislabeling a slide or misplacing a model component. I practice corrective phrases like, thank you for pointing that out. I will fix it now, or I see, let's adjust this together, which reinforce polite interaction. Teamwork language and problem-solving vocabulary. And as we rehearsed our presentation, I practiced phrases like, first, I will introduce the topic, then explain the research methodology, and finally summarize our findings. And my stepbrother added, I'll demonstrate the visual model to support your explanation, which gave me a chance to practice sequencing, connecting phrases and interactive dialogue in English. And during moments of disagreement about conclusions or slide order, I practice compromise by saying, I understand your view. Let's combine our approaches to cover everything, and he responded, yes. That works well and keeps both perspectives, and these exchanges taught me how to express opinions politely, negotiate solutions, and collaborate effectively. And I also reflected aloud on my feelings, saying, I feel proud that we are working well together, or I was frustrated at first, but now I feel more confident sharing my ideas, which allowed me to practice emotional vocabulary and self-reflection in English. And as we finalized the slides and rehearsed, I narrated every step, describing actions, summarizing research, and explaining reasoning using phrases like, we first researched credible sources, then analyzed the findings, and finally created visuals to illustrate our results. And I also narrated our coordination, saying, while I explained the research, my stepbrother demonstrated the model and clarified key points, which helped me practice simultaneous description, collaboration language, and detailed sentence construction. And over the course of working on this project, I noticed my English fluency improving because I was repeatedly using vocabulary for teamwork, negotiation, problem solving, instructions, sequencing, and emotional expression. And I also realized that narrating my actions aloud helped me organize my thoughts, practice sentence structure, and internalize new words. While interacting with my stepbrother gave me a real-life context for conversation, compromise, and collaborative problem-solving. And I began to feel more confident speaking English, not just for the project, but also in social situations, because I had practiced explaining ideas, clarifying points, asking questions, and giving advice in a supportive, interactive environment. And reflecting on the entire process, I realized that working with my stepbrother taught me valuable skills beyond academics, including patience, empathy, communication, teamwork, and the ability to express myself clearly in English. And every step, question, explanation, correction, and discussion reinforced my learning, helping me grow academically, linguistically, and personally. And now, looking back, I feel proud that what started as a challenging assignment with disagreements turned into a meaningful learning experience where I practiced negotiation, collaboration, reflection, and language actively. And I know that these skills will stay with me for life because the combination of narrating actions, expressing feelings, asking questions, explaining reasoning, compromising, and summarizing has given me confidence to tackle any group project, communicate effectively, and continue building English fluency naturally and confidently in every real-life situation. After we agreed on our initial approach and divided our responsibilities, we began the phase of dividing tasks and coordinating our work, which was both exciting and challenging because each of us had different strengths. And I remember thinking carefully about how to assign responsibilities so that we would be efficient and balanced. And I suggested I can handle the research and summarize key points, while you can focus on preparing visuals and assembling the model. And he responded, "That sounds good. I can also double check your data to make sure everything is accurate." And from that moment, we started mapping out a detailed schedule, using sequencing phrases like first, second, next, finally, and conditional statements such as, if I finish my section early, I can help with the visual setup. And narrating these plans aloud helped me practice collaboration and project management vocabulary in English while ensuring clarity and mutual understanding. And as we started researching, I narrated each step, saying, I am reading this article and highlighting the important points for our summary, while my stepbrother described. I am designing the chart to show the trends we found, and these ongoing narrations reinforced descriptive verbs, sequencing and explanatory phrases in English. And as we worked, small disagreements arose, like whether a particular chart was necessary or if a slide had too much information. And I practiced polite conflict resolution phrases, saying, I understand your concern, but perhaps we can simplify the chart instead of removing it entirely. And he replied, that's reasonable. We can adjust it so it's clear without losing detail. And I realized that these exchanges were helping me internalize negotiation and compromise vocabulary, as well as learn to articulate ideas clearly and listen actively. And when mistakes occurred, such as mislabeling a graph or misplacing images in the slides, we used them as learning opportunities. And I practiced conditional English expressions like, if we adjust the graph now, it will be accurate for the presentation, or if we double check the labels, we can avoid mistakes later. And narrating corrections aloud helped me refine both language and problem-solving skills. And as we rehearsed our presentation, I described my own actions, saying, I will explain the methodology first, then present the findings, and finally summarize the conclusions, while my stepbrother added, I'll demonstrate the model and highlight the key data points, which gave me a chance to practice descriptive coordination, sequencing, and interactive dialogue in English. And during practice sessions, we simulated possible questions from classmates and teachers, and I practiced answers using phrases like, based on our research, we concluded that, or we considered multiple sources, which confirmed our findings, which allowed me to refine clarity, articulation, and confidence in public speaking. And throughout this process, I reflected aloud on my own growth, saying, I feel proud because I am able to collaborate effectively, communicate clearly, and contribute meaningfully. Or I was hesitant at first, but now I feel confident leading this part of the project. And these reflections help me internalize emotional and evaluative vocabulary. And as we approached the final assembly of the project, I described every step aloud, narrating how we combine visuals, text, and model, saying, I am placing the final images, checking for clarity, and summarizing the key points on each slide while my stepbrother narrated. I'm adjusting the model to match the slides and verifying the labels. And this practice helped me consolidate process-oriented vocabulary, conditional phrases, and coordination language. And by repeating explanations aloud, asking clarifying questions, negotiating solutions, and solving mistakes together, I noticed that my English fluency, confidence, and teamwork skills had improved dramatically because I could articulate thoughts clearly, respond appropriately to feedback, negotiate politely, explain processes in sequence, and express emotions and opinions effectively. And reflecting on the entire advanced collaboration phase, I realized that working closely with my stepbrother on every step, dividing tasks, coordinating actions, refining strategies, correcting mistakes, rehearsing explanations, and reflecting on our progress was the most effective way to practice English for real-life collaborative contexts, develop confidence, enhance problem-solving skills, and build emotional resilience. And I could see that these repeated interactive experiences, combined with narration, reflection, and dialogue, created a natural, immersive environment for learning vocabulary, conditional reasoning, sequencing language, collaboration phrases, and negotiation dialogue. And as I look back on these weeks, I feel proud of how our project transformed from a source of potential conflict into an opportunity for learning, personal growth, and confident English communication. And I hope viewers understand that consistent narration, active participation, polite negotiation, and reflective practice are essential for mastering teamwork, communication, and English fluency in real-life group projects and collaborative assignments, because every question asked, answer given, mistake corrected, and solution negotiated is an opportunity to practice language, reasoning, and interpersonal skills effectively and naturally. And this experience taught me that patience, clarity, self-expression, active listening, compromise, and structured collaboration are all interconnected, and that applying these strategies consistently allows learners to gain confidence, improve fluency, and develop practical communication and problem-solving skills that last a lifetime. And sharing this journey as Lily, I hope viewers are inspired to engage fully in every collaborative task, communicate openly, reflect thoughtfully, narrate actions aloud, and practice conditional, sequencing, and descriptive language actively, because every step, conversation, and interaction is a chance to build English fluency, teamwork skills, and personal confidence simultaneously. And I can now confidently approach any group assignment, explain ideas clearly, respond effectively to questions, negotiate solutions politely, and narrate processes fluently in English, all of which I attribute to the consistent practice, reflection, and interactive collaboration with my stepbrother throughout this project. And every small task, every discussion, every question, and every correction was a practical exercise in real-life English communication, which reinforced not only my language ability, but also my confidence, emotional intelligence, and ability to collaborate effectively under pressure. And reflecting further, I realized that these experiences gave me skills that I can apply to future school projects, workplace tasks, or social group activities, because the combination of active narration, reflective thought, clear expression, polite negotiation, and structured teamwork creates a strong foundation for fluency, confidence, and real-world problem solving. And I feel proud to have developed these skills while completing this project with my stepbrother. Because it wasn't just about the assignment, it was about learning to communicate, compromise, and express myself effectively in English, and understanding how to navigate collaboration, solve problems, and reflect on each step. And I hope that anyone listening can see how incorporating narration, active dialogue, reflection, and problem solving into their own practice can make English learning not just educational, but natural, immersive, and empowering. And it has truly shown me that real-life collaboration and thoughtful practice are what transform knowledge into fluency, confidence, and practical skills that last a lifetime. Finally, the day came to present our school project to the class, and I could feel a mix of excitement, nervousness, and pride because after weeks of research, planning, coordinating, practicing, and refining our work, everything had finally come together. And as we walked up to the front, I narrated quietly to myself, saying, "Leave prepared thoroughly." And I know I can explain our findings clearly, while my stepbrother whispered, "We're ready. Let's show our work." And when we began presenting, I took the lead by explaining the research methodology, saying, first, we analyzed reliable sources to gather relevant data. Then we organized the information into categories, and finally, we created visuals to illustrate the trends and key points, and my stepbrothers seamlessly added. I prepared the visual model and charts to support the findings, demonstrating the relationships between the data points, and narrating our explanations aloud allowed me to practice sequencing, clarity, and formal English. And as we continued, I described the details of each section, saying things like, "This chart represents the distribution of responses across categories." And we cross-checked each figure for accuracy, and he added complimentary commentary, saying, "These visuals help make the conclusions more accessible and understandable for the audience," which reinforced our coordination, teamwork, and language skills. And during the Q&A portion, I practiced responding to unexpected questions with phrases like, "That's an interesting question." Based on our analysis, we concluded that, or we considered multiple sources which confirmed this outcome. And my stepbrother supported me by providing additional explanations when needed, demonstrating how collaborative responses can enhance confidence, fluency, and problem solving in English. And reflecting on the entire presentation, I realized how much I had grown because I was able to communicate clearly, explain ideas step by step, and answer questions effectively, all while maintaining composure and confidence. And I began thinking about the skills I had developed over the project: effective communication, negotiation, problem solving, sequencing, conditional reasoning, polite expression of opinions, active listening, collaboration, and reflective narration. And I recognized that each of these skills contributed not only to completing the project successfully, but also to my personal growth and English fluency. And I felt proud of how I could now express complex ideas, negotiate compromises, solve unexpected issues, and collaborate seamlessly with another person, using English confidently in a real-life context. And as I reflected on the process, I remembered the moments of tension at the beginning, the disagreements over the approach, the mistakes we corrected together, the rehearsals, and the mutual encouragement. And I realized that every challenge had been an opportunity to learn, and that through consistent practice, active narration, and collaborative effort. I had strengthened my confidence and my practical English skills, and thinking further, I noted that these experiences reinforced the importance of patience, listening, empathy, clarity, and strategic planning, because each interaction required us to explain ideas clearly, respond to feedback thoughtfully, and adjust our approach when necessary. And I began to understand that these skills are transferable to other group projects, social interactions, and professional tasks in the future. And as I considered my audience of viewers, I wanted to highlight the key takeaways: that learning English is most effective when practiced in context, through active engagement, narration, dialogue, reflection, and collaboration, and that facing challenges, making mistakes, and negotiating solutions are not setbacks but opportunities for growth. And I encourage viewers to embrace every collaborative task as a chance to practice fluency, build confidence, improve problem-solving skills, and strengthen teamwork and thinking about my own progress. I reflected on how far I had come from the first day of the project, when disagreements felt intimidating and communication was awkward, to this final moment where I could present confidently, coordinate smoothly with my stepbrother, answer questions, and explain the research, methodology, and conclusions clearly and effectively. And I realized that the combination of narration, reflective self-talk, polite negotiation, structured collaboration, sequencing, and problem-solving had not only allowed me to complete the project successfully, but also transformed my ability to use English naturally, fluently, and confidently. And I thought about how every small action, asking a clarifying question, summarizing a point aloud, narrating a step, correcting a mistake, explaining reasoning, or reflecting on progress had contributed to this growth. And I wanted viewers to understand that real progress comes from practice, consistency, and reflection, and that actively using English in meaningful situations, rather than just memorizing phrases or vocabulary, leads to authentic fluency and confidence. And I concluded my reflections by saying, this project taught me the value of collaboration, clear communication, and active participation, and it showed me that English fluency grows fastest when you engage fully, narrate your actions, reflect on your learning, and work together with others. And I felt a deep sense of accomplishment because the project had strengthened not only my language skills, but also my confidence, teamwork abilities, and problem-solving capacity. And I hope that by sharing my experience, viewers could see how practical application, consistent narration, reflective thought, and collaborative effort can transform English learning, making it natural, effective, and enjoyable. And I encouraged everyone listening to embrace challenges, communicate openly, negotiate politely, reflect actively, and narrate their actions aloud, because these strategies will help build fluency, confidence, and real-world problem-solving skills that last a lifetime. And finally, I felt proud knowing that the lessons learned through this school project planning, coordinating, practicing, reflecting, correcting mistakes, explaining clearly, negotiating compromises, and collaborating effectively would guide me in every future academic, professional, and social endeavor. And that these skills are not only useful for English, but for personal growth, teamwork, and success in all areas of life. And I wanted to leave viewers with the message that each project, Conversation and interaction is a chance to practice English, build confidence, and strengthen collaboration skills. And that embracing every challenge with patience, reflection, and active participation will lead to meaningful growth, natural fluency, and enduring personal and academic success.